All right, welcome to GCP Online Meetup number 22, Migrations over Migraines. I'm so happy to have all of you here today. We are here in studio with Mr. Ivan Ramirez. And we also have Steph. How are you, Steph?
I'm good. How are you?
Good to have you. So, Ivan, what are we talking about today?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Really wanted to do one of these, so I'm really excited that you're giving me this chance. Today, we're going to talk about migrations over migraines. So here in Google Cloud, we're constantly working with a lot of different customers who are either looking to go from on-premise to cloud or switch cloud providers. And one of the biggest questions they always ask us is, how do I even begin to think about doing something like this, right?
Yeah.
So what this few slides that I put together are trying to show is to demystify the complexity behind a migration and just show you some of the cool tools we've developed alongside with our partners to make it really easy for our customers to do so.
And today I think you're going to talk about how you migrate like a compute over to GCP.
Exactly. I'm not particularly talking about like some of our managed services such as App Engine or Cloud SQL, but I'm just talking about your bare metal, just VMs.
Right. And maybe we can have like a short discussion on some of the other pieces like storage, databases, and yeah.
Sure. And then to top it all off at the end, I'm also going to show a quick demo where I go to AWS, get an EC2 instance, load it up with a little bit of software, and then actually migrate it to GCP. Just so that you guys can get kind of that step-by-step walkthrough.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
So first, I wanted to give you guys kind of like a quick summary, like too long, didn't read kind of slides. So if there's anything that you get out of this presentation, it should be this. First of all, migration, as we just discussed, is not always that easy, right? It's not as simple as lift and shift. There's a lot of interdependencies that we need to take in consideration, networking considerations, and also your cloud provider, or if you're on-premise, may work differently with things such as networking or even compute instance sizes or even performance. So there's a lot of things that you need to take in consideration when we talk about migrating. Something else that you should see or remember from this presentation is two of our top partners when it comes to migration, which is Cloud Endure and Stratazone. And I'm going to be spending a couple of minutes just talking about what they currently offer and how it is so seamlessly integrated into GCP.
Great.
Yeah, it's also important to note that these things are free to use and they're compatible with a variety of different operating systems. And again, they can go from on-premise to cloud, cloud to cloud, whatever your needs may be.
So I have to ask, you said it's free, but how do these partners get paid then? Is it for more complex, larger engagements?
Sure. So a lot of these partners are actually engaged for more complex engagements. So if you're looking for kind of like professional services or consulting type engagements, then they will be brought in.
Got it.
We also have like an agreement with these cloud providers. Obviously, we benefit from the fact that our clients can migrate to GCP, and that's how we also see it, right? And something else that's actually a good question. It's not completely free, so you would not be paying Cloud Endure or Stratazone a penny when you're using the services. We actually take care of all of that. But you will have to pay for the resources that are being utilized to make the transition, right?
Of course.
So if we have like a staging server, and I'll show you this during the demo, you will have to pay for the time that resource is up and running. Okay. And then I have this really funny meme. Everybody kind of freaks out the second they start talking about migration. So we're here to tell you that it's not too complicated, right? Obviously, we can't simplify everything, but it's generally not that complicated. Usually when you ask one of your developers or tell them or let them know that you're about to start a migration process, you usually get really negative feedback right away where it's a quick no, right?
Yeah.
Have you experienced anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, no one wants to, especially if you're managing the environment, no one wants to do migrations because it's change, right? And change always usually results in something broken. I don't know, Steph, what about you? What are your thoughts on migrations?
So I formerly worked in mainframe. So anytime you talk about migration, especially with people in legacy systems, they look at you like you're crazy. A lot of that has to go with, and they're like, how much code am I going to have to refactor? Like, my database is huge, and some people seem to think they have more than what our systems can handle, and we're just like, yeah, that's fine. 20 petabytes is good. We can work with that. So it's always, people are so used to the limitations of their data centers that they don't really realize, how expansive the cloud can be.
Yeah.
And what I see often happen is that people are so afraid of change, or people are so scared to actually migrate, that they'll actually push their resources to the very limit, to the point where they have no option but migrate, right? And I think that's usually the point that we're trying to avoid, right?
Yeah, you don't want to get in that situation.
Right.
No.
So, and that's actually some of the challenges that we see in the industry today, right? Customers have their on-premise. They see that they're scaling, they're buying a lot of physical hardware in order to keep up with their demands, but they see kind of the end of this era where they simply cannot continue to buy more and more boxes, right? So those are some of the challenges that we're actually trying to meet. So customers come to us with things like, hey, we want to migrate all these loads. We want an easy transition. How can we do it? Those are the kind of things that we're going to be discussing today, as well as a lot of people don't know, but Cloud Endure can actually also be used for disaster recovery, which is something that I'm going to talk about a little bit too.
Yeah, I think migrations, I mean, I think, so what about like high availability? Like when you're doing migrations, you don't have, I think in this case, we're expecting you shut down the machine and then you to make copies and things like that. Is there like a high availability best practice maybe around that?
Sure, and that's where, or that's why Cloud Endure, I believe, plays such an important role, because it enables you to do all those things that we just mentioned, such as replication, high availability, and then a smooth transition or smooth cutover without ever having to shut down your machines, right? So let's say that you have an application and you have a lot of users constantly using the application. There's no need to actually go ahead and close that. My apologies. There we go. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about how this actually works, right? It's actually quite interesting. So let's say that you have your source disks, right? And this source disk can be on-premise, it could be on the cloud, it could be pretty much anywhere. And essentially what we would do with Cloud Endure is that we would essentially install a Cloud Endure agent. That agent will be within each one of the instances in our deployment. So for some companies, this may be a couple tens of machines. For bigger companies, it might be thousands of machines. And we can talk about how you would distribute the agent when it gets to those larger cases. But what this agent then does is that it communicates to your Google Cloud Platform environment and then creates a bootable image that is not running until you tell it to run, that is continuously replicating second by second as you're making changes. So let's say that you're getting ready for a migration in a month, right? You install the agent, you let it run, and any changes you make within that month are automatically recorded by the agent and saved into a volume within GCP. And this makes it so that whenever, after you've already set up the network and you're ready to go, you simply click a cutover button, and that instance will spin up on GCP and you'll be ready to take in traffic.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. There is a question. How do you handle all of those operating systems? Maybe we need more context.
Yeah, a little more context.
Okay, yeah, John. So maybe if you can maybe provide more context and elaborate on what you mean by handle all of those operating systems. I'm assuming that the agent does the replication.
Yeah, the agent does the replication of everything. So what it does is that it goes in and it copies your entire boot disk and any other dependent boot disks within your instance. So it even copies the entire operating system.
Okay, so it doesn't know what it's copying. It's literally just copying everything. Okay,
right. And then it copies it in such a way that then it can be bootable, or it can boot from within GCP. That's correct. Actually, I think the next slide here talks about operating system. So maybe this answers your question.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, even before we answer it. We're compatible with a wide variety of different operating systems. So CentOS, CoreOS, Debian, Red Hat, Ubuntu, as well as some Microsoft licenses. Obviously, with the Microsoft licenses, we have to be a little careful because obviously you have an agreement with Microsoft, so you have to be careful as to how many instances you're spinning up with a particular license. But we are capable of using the Cloud Endure agent to replicate an instance that is running Windows. And again, as we mentioned before, it doesn't matter if you're going from on-premise to cloud, or if you're going from Amazon to GCP, or any between any of the cloud providers. You can use this technology to simplify your migration. Now, a big differentiator, though, right now is that, as we mentioned before, GCP is kind of absorbing all the costs that you would generally have when you use Cloud Endure. So the experience that you would have, let's say, migrating an EC2 instance into GCP is a lot different than the experience that you will have from GCP to AWS, just because of how integrated we are with some of these partners, right? It's actually part of the console, right? You don't even need to get out of the console. You click a button and it's ready to go.
Yeah, oh, that's nice.
Yeah. All right.
So in summary, you use Linux.
I'm sorry.
In summary, you use Linux.
Yeah.
Linux.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk a little bit about the open source technologies and all this kinds of stuff, but usually when you're using something that you need to pay for a license, I mean, it just makes things a lot more complicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we can talk about Microsoft or Microsoft SQL, and it just makes things a little harder. And I think the industry as a whole is moving away from that, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the trend. I mean, obviously, net new workloads are basically Linux based,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, there are definitely still customers who want to do lift and shift with their old things like Unix that we might not support, like John had mentioned on the chat.
And that's something that I see a lot with our customers, and how willingly we are to adapt to our customer needs, because we not only let you do a lift and shift if you want to kind of lift your machine intact, but if you're thinking about re-architecting or anything like that, we have a great team of customer engineers and solution architects that can step up to the challenge, right? Well, in this last slide, as I finish or conclude talking about Cloud Endure, I also want to bring up the point that it's not necessarily only used for migrations, right? Cloud Endure is actually one of the biggest players, in my opinion, that simplifies the disaster recovery thought process. So if you have, or if you're the type of person who just invested a lot of money into a data center, right, and you see yourself being there for the next 5 years, well, why not use Google Cloud, or really any cloud provider, right? But focus on Google Cloud for your disaster recovery needs. It would work exactly the same way a migration would work, where we would install the agent into a server. We'll do continuous replications, and if we ever need to do a backup because of a disaster or anything like that, we will simply take it from the cloud and boot our instances straight from our data center the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, Steph, but I think a trend that I'm seeing, especially with large organizations who have been on-prem for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they are trying to use cloud as a way to do simple things like backup, disaster recovery, and just to be able to not have idle capacity sitting around just for that. So having kind of pay per use has been good on their for accounting, but also just easy for them to leverage the cloud for backup purposes.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with how cheap storage is becoming, especially in the cloud, right? And especially when it comes to backups and disaster recovery, these are things that you hope never to have to use, right? Yeah, so having something taking up space in your data center that you hope never have to use, I mean, it's kind of
It's almost like paying insurance.
It is like paying insurance, exactly like paying insurance. That's right.
There's also this trend of like rapid data growth, especially since we've introduced IoT and various services that are accruing a ton of data at any given time, and these companies just don't have the capacity or the planning time to say, okay, I'm going to spin up, several SANs and a new RAID array, and I have to worry about heating and cooling and storage and space and people to take care of it. Now they can just say, okay, I've got 10 more petabytes of data in a year. Let me just put it into the cloud. Not necessarily too concerned about what happens to that data. But even then, I have the resiliency of these companies backing the storage.
And I think that's a really good point that you just brought up, because I don't think it's just about like the infrastructure side, but it's also about the time side of things, right? You don't have to worry about setting up the systems, maintaining them, making sure that they're up and running, and so on. You can, you can go ahead and just back up your systems into the cloud, and then never have to worry about anything like this.
Yeah, I mean, I was working with a Fortune 10, one of the biggest companies in the world. It took them a year to get storage infrastructure into production. That's a long time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just one plug for our Google Cloud Storage. I mean, we have all the performance across all tiers are exactly the same. And so that means that if for some reason you need it, you don't have to pull it from tape, take 4 hours to get it. You can get it instantaneously.
And what I would say is, imagine if your customer growth is growing exponentially, which is what any company would love to see. but all of a sudden your IT infrastructure cannot keep up with the demand. I think that's something.
Yeah,
it's a place where you don't want to be.
exactly.
Well, we went a little bit on a tangent talking
let's get
about
to a demo.
disaster
Come on,
recovery.
Ivan. Let's do it. I want to see the demo.
Well, the last thing that I want to talk about before we go into the demo is about another partner that I've been working with very closely in the last couple of days, which is called Stratazone. Stratazone also offers a wide variety of different solutions, and they're very well integrated into GCP. One of the tools that are free for GCP users to take advantage of is their Analyze tool. And their Analyze tool is very unique because it does a lot of really interesting things. The first thing that it does is that it maps all the interdependencies between all of your servers. So let's say that you're a small company, right? You may have 20 servers, and you may be it may be very clear as to what the interdependencies are between all the servers. But now imagine you're a big corporation with thousands and thousands of different servers, all with unique operating systems, unique software versions, so on and so forth. You need a way to keep track of not just all the interdependencies between the servers, but also what the loads are and how they map to GCP.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, actually, we were just working on that the other day. Like, how do you know what you need, right?
Exactly.
I mean, because if if your workload on-prem is only running at 1% capacity,
right?
Do you really want to just do a copy and paste into Google Cloud?
And then we go into like what kind of like CPU cores were you using?
Yeah.
Were you using hyper-threaded? How's the performance differ?
That's awful.
So tools like this really make it very seamless. So essentially what you would do is very similar to Cloud Endure, that you would install an agent that has access to all these machines, and it will monitor not just in the interdependencies between them, but also how much utilization they get. And then it will go ahead and draw a little map for you to help you organize yourself as you're migrating. So I'd say that Stratazone with a combination of Cloud Endure are some of the, not only the best partners, but the most valuable tools that we have.
Very nice.
Right. And of course, here's a little map of interdependencies, and it's something that you obviously do not want to do by hand, right? It's something that will take you probably hours, or maybe if someone asked you, what are the interdependencies between your servers, you might be thinking, wow, I really wish I would have written that down, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go into a quick demo. So the demo that I created, like I mentioned before, is simply me spinning up an AWS instance and utilizing Cloud Endure to migrate it to GCP. It's about a 6-minute demo, which we're about to play right now. Okay. And we'll be answering questions as we're playing that.
Got a lot of questions.
Okay.
But I'll wait.
Sounds good. Okay, so I think we need to do some. And in the crowd, please let us know if the audio is working for everyone.
I'm a customer engineer here with Google Cloud, and today I'm going to walk you step by step on how to do a migration from an EC2 instance to a Compute Engine instance in GCP. For this, we will be utilizing the Cloud Endure agent, which essentially will be installed within an EC2 instance and will automatically copy the entire boot disk, transfer it over to GCP, and turn it into a format that is bootable by our Compute Engine instance. So we'll go ahead and get started here in the AWS console. As you can see, we've already set up a EC2 instance called Migration 2. And what we're going to do is essentially just install a little bit of software into that EC2 instance to prove that we have successfully migrated this EC2 instance into GCP. And now we'll verify that Apache 2 has been installed properly, but making sure we get the splash screen when going into the external IP address, which is right here. We'll go ahead and plug it into the browser. And we do, in fact, get that splash screen. Perfect. All right, so now we're going to navigate to the Google Cloud Platform. And under Compute Engine and VM instances, you'll see the option to import a server. So we're going to go ahead and click it. And it's going to redirect us to the Cloud Endure migration tool, which is going to look something like this. And we're going to choose the live migration option. Here you'll be shown your agent installation token, as well as the different commands to install the agent within Linux. So we're essentially just going to copy paste this command into our Linux machine. We're going to see that it installs fairly quickly. And then we're going to go back to the migration tool and go ahead and execute the agent with the token that we were just provided. And we'll go ahead and run that on our machine. It's going to take a few seconds to finish loading everything and for it to activate the agent. It's going to ask us to choose exactly which block devices we want to store, or you could just leave it empty if you want to choose them all. And then we'll let the agent run. And finally, once it's done, it's going to let us know to please go back to the dashboard in order to continue the synchronization portion. So we'll go ahead and go back to the Cloud Endure console. We'll select the agent, and you'll see that it's already initiated the replication process. So it's just basically setting up a couple firewall rules, it's identifying the server, the size, and establishing that communication. And you'll see that a microserver has been initiated in the Google Cloud Platform. And it is this microserver who's facilitating the replication between the EC2 instance and actually creating that new server in GCP. Checking back on the Cloud Endure migration page, we see that all the services has been working in the background and have already initiated, and that the synchronization process is taking place. Now we are asked to set up a blueprint, basically what type of machine, or defining the type of machine that we would like to set up for the migration. So we're going to pick an N1 standard 1. We're going to specify just the name in lowercase letters, which is the standard in GCP. And then just define if we want to create a new subnet or create a private IP, whatever it may be. We're just going to leave everything as the defaults and save the blueprints. And then we'll see that the synchronization is going to take a little bit to complete. So we'll just give it a few seconds as it loads up. And the speed at which this happens will vary a lot depending on your internet speeds and the connectivity to GCP, of course. Now, after everything has been completed and continuous replication has been set up, we'll essentially just have to give everything a few seconds in order for not only the communication to be completely established, but for Cloud Endure to also perform a test to make sure that the target machine and the original machine is all communicating properly. Now that the test has completed, we can select the machine we're migrating and then select this cutover button. This cutover button will essentially cut over our replication instance and actually spin it up on GCP so that it's ready for production. We'll go ahead and create a new target machine for it, and then go back to the Google Cloud Console to see our machine being spun up. We'll go ahead and refresh the page a couple times, and we see how Cloud Endure has created a second machine, which in a few seconds is going to turn into an exact copy of the EC2 instance that we configured not too long ago. And there's our instance, just like we named it in the blueprint. So we'll go ahead and select it, and we're going to go ahead and edit the firewall rules, because even though we are migrating the machine itself, we still are responsible for setting up the networking rules. We'll give it a second for it to update. And now we're going to go ahead and test our machine by taking the external IP address and plugging it into the browser, and we get that Apache 2 splash screen again. That has been the conclusion for our demo. I hope you guys enjoyed, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Great. Well, bam. Easy breezy, huh? That was a 5-minute demo. That was great. Well, so, I mean, obviously it seemed, everyone's going to question, like, it can't really be that easy, right? I mean, like, what are some of the networking challenges that you can run into?
Well, like I mentioned during the demo, Cloud Endure is an easy way to migrate a VM from point A to point B, but it does not migrate the networking rules. Mm-hmm. And that's why I also brought into discussion Stratazone, right? Because we need to know those networking interdependencies.
Right.
Something else that I've realized as I work with more and more customers is that each cloud provider does networking different. And on-premise networking is a lot different than cloud networking. Yeah. So for instance, in Google Cloud, we have our software-defined networking, right? Which makes things a lot easier. So some of the complexity that used to happen in other cloud providers or even on-premise is almost removed. So you do need to think a little bit about how you're going to re-architect your network.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I know you showed AWS. I mean, what about, are there any other cloud providers that we work with?
We work with we work with all different cloud providers, right? So if you have a load in Azure, if you have a load in Stack Overflow, if you have a load on premise, you can migrate any of these loads just like we did in that EC2 instance. Essentially the same process. You install the agent and you go. The only thing that I will say is that once you're dealing with thousands of machines, you don't want to have to go into each one of those machines one by one to install the agent, right? That'll be too much.
Right.
And we've had a lot of our customers use services such as Ansible or Puppet or Chef in order to distribute the software.
Got it. So basically using a configuration management tool to deploy it as if it's like a monitoring tool.
Exactly.
Okay. And then that's really helpful. Basically it's cloud agnostic. It doesn't care. It's just an agent. You put it on the machine, it'll replicate all the data, move it over. I mean, while we're talking about migrations, I know there's other questions around, like maybe Steph, you might know this, but like moving your users, right? You know, on premise we have LDAP, and I'm going to go to GCP. I don't even know. I've never actually done this for a customer. So maybe Steph, do you have any information on that?
Yeah, so the really great thing about how we do our G Suite side of the house and our administration with user identity is that people that have things like Active Directory can use Active Directory sync to pull in their existing user base. You can also do something we call offline. So basically you have some, you can use authentication with a user management system without having to say, I'm going to have to restart my entire organization in Google. So there's a couple options for moving your users over, for connecting with third-party SAML, things like that.
Okay. Yeah. So I think, with Google Cloud Platform, we're trying to provide all the tools necessary to move not just your compute, but storage, your users, your application, things like that. And I think a tough one that a lot of customers run into is databases. Database, you can't just kind of shut down, and even with an agent, you're always maybe doing writes and reads. Well, what's the strategy around migrating databases?
And when you talk about databases, there's a lot of things that we need to take into consideration, right? Specifically, just to answer your question, I want to focus on those open source databases that
like
you install in your instances, right? MySQL, Postgres, MongoDB, etc. Right? Since the agent does do a full, basically copy of your disk, then everything that's within your disk, including not just the database itself, but anything that you're writing into the database, will be copied over. Now, you go to Cloud Endure, you talk to GCP, we'll say that it's almost instant, but of course, there is going to be some type of discrepancy. You might lose some information when you're doing the cutover, just because, the network might take a couple milliseconds. If you put something in just inside that window, there may be something we lose. So there are best practices when we're doing these things, right? If we're migrating like a MySQL or Postgres instance, we would do it in the middle of the night or whenever you see your lowest usage, and make sure that we have the lowest amount of downtime possible, right? When we're doing that. So there are best practices around that.
Okay. I know that I think, the other recommendation we have to customers is you can always write it to if you are migrating to a different database, you can always write code to basically dual write into a separate database, timestamp when you're starting to do this dual write, and basically just do an export or, migrating some of the old data into the new database. So we've had customers do that as a strategy for moving databases as well. I don't know, Steph, do you have any opinion on migrating databases?
I think it's always when you get into migration, it's always a good time to address, is our database as good as it can be? For the most part, we support all of the databases in any form, whether you want them managed or, as you mentioned, within the VMs. But coming from a data background, it's sometimes a good time to say, you know what, our data is disgusting. We should take this time to cleanse it. What can we get out of this data? Is it good in the form that it is? So.
Yeah, it's like when you're moving a house, it's like a good time to just clean up all the junk in there and just clean it up.
Builds up over the years.
Yeah. I still have boxes from my last move that are never going to get unboxed. Yeah, that's just the way it is, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're at the half hour. I want to thank everyone for all your questions. Really good. Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Ivan, for being here. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.